You might be wasting time learning English at traditional language schools or academies, and if you've been taking courses for the last 6 months or a year, but you still feel like you don't have the confidence to walk into a conversation on the street with confidence, this video is for you. I'm guessing you're also the type of English learner, a professional who doesn't like to waste their time doing things that don't really help them make progress. If there's one thing that helped me learn to speak English confidently by the age of 20, is that I was very careful and intentional with what I spent my valuable, precious time with. Now, this video was inspired by one of my friends that I met back in London around 2016, who invested so much of his money in an English academy. He was supposed to take a 3-month course. He only took 2 months because he simply only studied grammar and vocabulary that he could practice on YouTube or by buying a bunch of books, but didn't see any progress with his conversation skills, let alone with his confidence. The moment he started joining our conversation practices that were targeted at his level, after a month, he said he was making 10 times faster progress with his confidence in having conversations with other people. The progress he made in the 2 months he spent studying at the traditional language school, mainly because of the reasons we're about to talk about today. In today's video, my intention is for you to understand why professionals might waste a lot of money and time signing up for a traditional English course. Effective English communicators I've had the chance to work with as an English coach in the last 17 years focus on to make faster progress with their fluency, and what changes you can make so you can shift your focus on activities that actually help you make progress. Usually the biggest problem, at least the people I've been talking to, is that traditional English courses only focus on grammar, sometimes way too much grammar and vocabulary, also teaching vocabulary super ineffectively, giving students a list of words, not really teaching students how to learn that vocabulary. They just hand those out. But learning to speak English fluently is so much more than just providing information and practice, grammar and vocabulary. Most importantly, these schools don't help students build the most crucial factor that determines how fast, effectively, and successfully a professional is going to learn to speak English, which is their self-efficacy. Simply put, self-efficacy is your belief in the fact that with effort, with consistency, with focus and patience, you're going to get better and better and better at your English skills, which is the #1 focus in my coaching program. Many of them only employ native speaker teachers because that's what brings them more students. The marketing works, lots of people take lessons because their teachers are native speakers without ever asking them about qualifications, their experience with learning the language, or anything else that would qualify them as professionals. These schools really often inundate you with grammar without any sort of structure. They just keep teaching new grammar, new vocabulary. What about effective reviewing, which helps you not just understand more grammar, but also consolidate grammar and be able to use it in a conversation? What about giving you support when you feel frustrated about not understanding what native speakers say? And instead of just playing these audio tracks and set them as homework, teaching you how we listen so you can recognize all those sounds and understand when people speak fast because you know all the sound rules of English, which is something I talk about in a previous video. What about giving you emotional support, which is, well, at least in my opinion, one of the most important factors in someone's success in our community with learning to speak English fluently? When you get confused about grammar, when you feel really frustrated about not remembering the vocabulary that you studied, or when you're scared of speaking in front of other people, or you feel like you keep repeating yourself, you say the same sentences, you make the same mistakes. So you can actually learn to express yourself with a wider range of vocabulary and communicate more effectively. Now, if you don't build self-efficacy, your belief in yourself that you can actually get better and better with effort, consistency, focus and patience, you're going to end up with a basic level of fluency because you never challenge yourself enough to get to the level where you would be able to speak English with a wider range of grammar and vocabulary. And basic fluency is something that, most people who spend a bit of time learning English in the 21st century can actually get to. So if you want to stand out, especially with AI taking so many jobs in the next couple of years, get a really good job, get a promotion, be able to move to your dream country, or just feel comfortable about speaking English with your colleagues at work or in your private life. Basic fluency, which is where most people stop learning because they have been plateauing for such a long time, it's what we call the intermediate plateau, isn't going to be enough. And the only question you need to ask yourself to see if you have the belief that you can get to an advanced level of English is, are you bringing the best out of yourself every time you practice your English skills? And before you say, oh, but I can't speak English perfectly, so I'm not bringing the best out of myself, or I can't understand everything I hear in a movie or on a podcast, bringing the best out of yourself doesn't mean speaking English or understanding English perfectly. Quite the opposite, because it's usually this perfectionism that holds so many struggling English students back from what really helps them make progress, which is to bring the best out of themselves. Try and try and try, so they can get better and better and better at speaking English, expressing themselves, or communicating. Because they focus so much on their mistakes, on their struggles, or on their difficulties to put a sentence together, instead of what actually matters when it comes to learning a language, which is conversations and connections with people who don't speak your native language. So they end up not taking risks and use new vocabulary or new grammar to express themselves. And if they don't take those risks, they won't be able to automatize those. And they usually don't challenge themselves, walking into conversations about a different topic because they don't know enough about it, when part of fluency is being able to talk about a range of different topics with a wider range of vocabulary because of their fear of judgment. Instead of what we focus on in our fluency community, which gives so many of my students massive confidence over time, which is to start using the grammar and vocabulary you already know, conversation practices targeted at their level, staying consistent with their practice in a space where no one judges them, so they can start feeling safe about taking those risks, making those mistakes, rising up to those challenges that will help them make super fast progress. So instead of focusing on speaking perfectly, which honestly doesn't exist, they focus on speaking the best way they can, which is the way to fluency. It's the same thing when it comes to going to the gym. I mean, how do you expect to build a six-pack if you never go to the gym because you're only willing to do the workouts? If you do them perfectly, you're worried about what people in the gym think about you and say, yeah, one day I'm going to make time for it, but that time never comes. If you go keep lifting the same weight, like 3 kilograms over and over again, never challenging yourself so you can actually start building your muscles, or deciding to go to the gym, no matter how busy you are, making time for 1-2 sessions a week, not worried about what people in the gym think about you when you first start working out on that gym equipment. And because you stay consistent and also consistently increasing the difficulty, the intensity, first pulling 2 kilograms and then 3 kilograms, 5 kilograms, and so on, and you wake up one day and you have a six-pack. So instead of perfectionism, which really comes from this deep fear of other people's judgment or failure, which is just an interpretation, and I talk so much about this in my previous video because I've been through that. Effective English communicators focus on excellence, doing the best they can, bringing the best out of themselves every single time. And if they have a bad day, the best they can do is still something over nothing. Now, the second biggest reason these traditional English schools can be a waste of time when it comes to teaching students how to communicate effectively is that they are full of English native speakers. They are not necessarily employed because of their qualifications, their experience, and their experience with learning a second language, but because they are native speakers. I mean, tell me honestly, if you needed financial advice on how to become a millionaire, would you rather ask King Charles for advice or Warren Buffett? You would obviously ask someone for advice who has done what you've been through, who has walked the exact same path, has gone through the emotions, the strategies, and built the mindset of a person who's built wealth, and not from someone who was born into wealth without making much of an effort. Now, why wouldn't it work the same way when you're learning English? A native English speaker may have clear pronunciation, they can point out all those nuances to you about the language, so you learn more about the culture, you learn how to communicate more effectively, but they have never learned English as adults. They don't really know the tricks, the strategies, because they've never experienced learning a language. They've never experienced the emotions, the frustration about not making as fast progress as we want, the struggle to put a sentence together in your head, translating, taking a lot of time, and then still ending up saying a sentence that has a few mistakes, or the fear of judgment, the fear of making mistakes when you might have a strong accent or you still make a lot of mistakes at the beginning stages of your English learning journey. And if they can't relate to you emotionally, they can't help you build the mindset, not of a native speaker, but of a successful English learner, they may not be able to give you appropriate advice or support so you can make faster progress and without all the stress that comes with learning to speak English, which is something we focus so much on in our community. This is why you might see so many native English teachers on social media, I talked about this in a previous video, overwhelming you with idioms, vocabulary, advanced grammar, testing you, telling you that you can only be a C2 speaker if you say a certain word, or comparing your level of English, saying that it's basic just because you said a simple word that native speakers use all the time with native speaker level, which is just simply another way of saying the same thing but in a more formal or more advanced way. I mean, don't you use basic words as a native speaker of your native language when you communicate with your friends, your family? And consuming this type of don't say and stop saying and native speaker basic English kind of content can hold so many struggling English students back for years from having the confidence to speak English in front of other people. One of the things, and this kind of relates to this perfectionism we talked about earlier in this video, that can hold so many struggling English students back from speaking English confidently, and it's something I sent out an email about to my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, is their unrealistic expectation. And if you often find yourself looking for the next word, the perfect word to express yourself in a conversation, worrying about not being able to say a single sentence without making a mistake, embarrassing yourself, or blocking communication because you say something in a way that people don't understand you, or you're often getting frustrated about your lack of progress with your fluency and confidence, probably putting way too much expectation on yourself. Instead of saying, well, I can't speak English perfectly, but I can always try and speak better and better, because we know that we are learning through effort, challenges, consistency, and focus. And if you're interested in what exactly my students do to lower that unrealistic expectation, check out another video where I talk about everything you need to know about this topic. And the last point I really wanted to talk about in this video, that a lot of struggling English students don't get much support with in a traditional English school or academy. And many times the reason they cannot use grammar or vocabulary that they spend so much of their time studying with confidence in a conversation is this overwhelming amount of grammar and vocabulary that a lot of these English schools teach their students instead of simply teaching them how to learn. Learning how to learn is one of the most valuable skills a professional can ever acquire. But it's not what a lot of people think it is. A lot of people know how to study, they know how to memorize, but they don't understand the learning processes in the brain and the strategies they can use to remember more vocabulary, make progress in a shorter amount of time, and build confidence with ease. This is why so many struggling English students can watch hundreds of videos, movies, scroll on their phone for hours, consuming English content, studying grammar, watching grammar videos, or memorizing vocabulary, but still not be able to communicate effectively, but still not able to speak English fluently, communicate effectively, clearly, and confidently in a conversation because they haven't learned how to learn. So if I was consuming way too much English and study a lot of vocabulary, but then struggle to remember it in a conversation and say the same basic sentences with no change in grammar, no improvement in my vocabulary, or repeating the same mistakes over and over again in my conversations, the first skill I would definitely start acquiring is the skill of learning to learn. It's a skill, and this video is going to give you a full deep dive into what really helps my students learn 5-10 times faster than most people. Think of someone who wants to learn to play the guitar really well. How are they going to end up playing a gig in front of thousands of people with confidence? By watching other people playing the guitar in videos for hours and hours a day. They probably improve their guitar playing skills by playing that freaking guitar. So the first time they start playing the guitar, you know, because I started playing the guitar and I documented it back on my first Instagram account during COVID, because I was really looking for something to do that didn't have anything to do with my computer, not watching movies, Netflix, you know, doing classes. So when they start playing the guitar, do they play the guitar like Jimi Hendrix or like Santana? It could be a basic chord that they start with, and as they see themselves, this is why self-efficacy is so important. But because they consistently practice the basics, they see themselves succeeding, they get the motivation and the momentum to keep going and get better and better and better at playing the guitar. Does it feel uncomfortable? Sure it does. No one really likes sucking. But a few things that are going on in the guitar player's head is that they are still enjoying the process, because they invested in the process of learning to play the guitar, not in just the result, which is often a huge problem with struggling English students who don't have the motivation. They want the result, but they're not willing to do the work. They think about how they want to feel in the future, not how they feel right now, how uncomfortable, frustrated, confused they are. And they think about all the opportunities that they will have in life if they learn to play the guitar. And by consistently making time for playing the guitar and doing something that's just a bit above their level, they're able to build their guitar skills until they reach their goal. It's the same thing when it comes to improving your speaking skills, your fluency, and your communication skills. Action, challenges, attention and focus, consistency, and patience are the 5 most important elements of learning to speak English effectively. Because focusing on these, the number 2 focus in our community, the number 1 is to make my students feel safe and free to make mistakes and mess up in their conversations, how you're going to make the most of your time and bring the best out of yourself to make the fastest progress possible. Because after all, you saw this in this video, what determines how fast effective English communicators make progress with their fluency, how stress-free their learning experiences, all depends on their self-efficacy, their ability to believe in themselves, the quality of guidance, support they get from their mentors, coaches, teachers, and from the people they are learning together with, their classmates, and the quality of their learning, how effectively they're learning to speak English with the limited amount of time and energy they have available. What's your experience studying English at a traditional English school? Have you seen success? Do you feel like you weren't making much progress? You aren't making much progress right now? Let me know. I'm curious about your perspective. And thank you for making it to the end of the video. Remember, to keep learning English effectively, all you really need to do is to embrace the challenges and keep facing those fears. And then you will create a better life for yourself as a fluent, confident, bilingual English speaker. Thank you so much again for watching. Hope to see you in another video.